welcome to episode 4 of the Better Players, Better People podcast. I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, Liam Hughes, the founder of Azul FC, a very, very good coach. And we're going to be talking through football coaching, his journey to date, his experiences in the UK, America, where we met, and now in Dubai. So welcome, Liam. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me on, Jay.
So first question, we always do this with our guests, is can you just give me a brief summary of your sporting career to date and what led you to be setting up Azul FC here in Dubai?
Well, I think if you go back to it, obviously we met back in the US, which is crazy, in a bit of a small world. We're two lads from Liverpool, but we've ended up in the States.
Chasing the sun.
Well, that was it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I think you almost earn your stripes, don't you? In especially with Challenger Sports, who we both worked for. You know, you're working 6-7 days a week. And it's quite a relentless day-to-day. You know, you're coaching constantly. So that was kind of where that all started for me. Obviously, a little bit younger, you're playing, and you know, nowhere near good enough. You know, we'll talk about the level later in the UK and Europe. And then from there, you know, headed back, started to study my coaching badges. Had a little stint out in the UAE. Early, would have been mid-2000s, late 2000s. And then after that, headed back to the UK, continued on with my coach education journey, climbed that ladder a little bit, spent a bit of time at Preston North End coaching in the academy, moved on to Manchester City, which was, again, fantastic for my development as a coach. And then
it's a bit of a leap, isn't it? How'd you go from Preston to Man City?
Well, relatively close, Manchester and Preston, aren't they? So.
You were local.
And then kind of after that, well, alongside it and after it, coach education played a big part in terms of delivering with the FA on the what was the FA Level 1, which is now kind of been transferred to the UEFA C licence. And then from there, a little stint in Canada for a couple of years. So I've done quite a bit of travelling, and now I've ended up in the UAE for the last 3.5 years.
In Dubai.
Yeah.
I think we need to talk about America.
Okay.
First, we need to give a shout out to all the Challenger coaches, hopefully, that are watching this. You do earn your stripes there. I remember many a time, soccer schools, mini kicks in the morning, but I think that's where, as a coach, you hone your skills, the ability to engage the kids, all varieties, all abilities. And on the other end of the scale, I think we both in America had experiences with high school teams, their better soccer clubs and so on. But yeah, let's touch on that. I mean, that's where we met. It was obviously a very different time for both of us then. It was probably pre our serious careers. Yeah. But I look back on that with very fond memories. Still got friends, a lot of them based in Dubai. You come across them on the PE network. A lot of them have moved into PE teaching. A lot of them have moved into sports coaching. I could rattle off 10 or 20 that are still in the industry. What are your memories of soccer schools in the States in the summer? Because it's not an uncommon road to walk. I think a lot of people are doing it and continue to do it, hopefully.
Well, just on that point there, continue to do it. What I'd almost urge, you know, if there's someone who wants to get into the coaching kind of world, or even just sport in general, PE teaching, you know, if they're in university or maybe even pre-university, the opportunity that the US and Challenger Sports afforded myself, you know, to where I am, where I was to where I am now. I went over there, you know, 18, 19 years of age with very, very little experience of coaching. I'd done my FA Level 1, which is kind of your introduction to football coaching. But when you're on the pitch over there, there's no kind of guidelines. Don't get me wrong, there was a Challenger Sports booklet, and you know, they help you on that Challenger weekend where they give you some advice, but it's over to you. So I remember spending my time on that 10-hour flight and the exchanges, just planning session after session after session. And when I got there, you know, may as well rip them sessions up. But I think it's all about being adaptable. I think that was the big thing I learned on the 9 months I was there was, you know, you might be working with 3 and 4 year olds, the mini kickers, like you said. And then later in that day, in the afternoon, you might be working with the high school under 14 girls, for example. And the way you coach the mini kick is completely different to the way you coach the under 14, 15 high school girls. But I think what does stay relevant throughout that, regardless when you're coaching, is the way you are and the way you come across. And it's that kind of interpersonal skill that you have with a 4-year-old and also with a 14-year-old. So,
I'm often remembered, or it comes back to me now when I meet students who are going out to America on a scholarship. We worked with coaches who'd completed their scholarship and still wanted to stay on the grass, and they went into coaching that way. And I've talked about this with previous people on the podcast about as a climate to deliver football. If you love being on the sports field, America's got a lot, similar to Dubai. It's got the weather, it's got the sun, great lifestyle. But again, I can only echo if people are interested in traveling, I would say that as well. If they want to see different parts of the world,
Sure, yeah.
and they enjoy sport and coaching before they go into a proper job, a serious career, give it a go. We've still got friends now that we met all those years ago, and I think that's a big part of it. It's relationships and building relationships and going from there. So we're both here today. We're further down the road now. I want to get straight into Azul FC. What led you to creating your own football club here in Dubai?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, like I said, I've been here 3.5 years now. It's almost my second stint, and I think it's all of the experiences I've had, not just in Dubai, but in the UK, in Canada, and across Europe, kind of all rolled into one. I mean, the key word there that we mentioned before is experience, and I've got a lot of it. Whether you choose to believe it or not, you look at the places I've been and the countries I've been in. Dubai, actually, and the UAE is very similar to the US and Canada in some respects. There's that pay-to-play aspect. Yeah. And I think over here, this podcast is a lot of it revolving around kind of educating parents. I mean, no better place to learn than the US and Canada. Yeah. So I think in my role in Canada, I was a technical director, so I was dealing with parents on a regular basis and pretty much not coaching as much as I might have liked to. I've come over to the UAE. I'm probably coaching a lot more than I certainly did. But I'm trying to kind of get that 50-50 balance of dealing with parents and helping them through making decisions, but also at the same time on the pitch, helping the players. So I think it was a long time in the making. It was coming. And there was a couple of opportunities that arose pre-summer. I didn't really want to take them. There would have been jumps out of the UAE into different countries. And this just made sense after the conversations I'd had with numerous people. I had a brief one with yourself as well at some stage, didn't I? Yeah. It's not fight or fly, but I've got the experience. Go and use it. So that's kind of where we are now.
So tell me about Azul FC then. What's the mission? What's the, have you got a 5-year plan, 10-year plan? What are you hoping to convey to parents and players that makes you stand out from the numerous other football clubs and youth academies now in the city and the region?
Well, there's a number of youth academies and football clubs. I think there's something like, last count, 200 plus football academies, a number of them out there. I think before we even get started, there's 10 or 15 which are absolutely outstanding. And those 10 or 15 football clubs and academies, you could do an outstanding job in Europe. There's no doubt about that. But then you kind of get beyond that 15-20 bracket. There's a mediocre kind of set, and then below that, there's upwards of 100 academies out there. It's almost what we call the Wild Wild West. So a big part of the reason of me kind of moving into that market was not just the experience I've got with coaching, but I want to provide a good service to the player. And whether that's a 5-year-old who is playing with us for 5 years, 10 years, or whatever it be, if they're still playing football and enjoying it when they're in the mid-20s, they might play 5-a-side with the work colleagues. That's success for me. We're not all going to be professional players, and I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly. But
look, I think one of the things I've always admired about you, Liam, is that the passion for football and proper coaching and coach education. We'll get into that in a minute. Upskilling yourself, making sure the kids in your care are getting the absolute best coaching is always rang true. So for me, it was really proud. Actually, I remember standing at your opening ceremony for Azul FC at the start of this, September, I think it was, when you opened the club up. I think that was an absolute combination of your years of graft, your experience, and then being brave enough to go out there and do it, because it's a big undertaking setting up a company here. Yeah. But obviously, you've touched on the pay-to-play aspect. You've had experience of that before in the States, Canada. You've had it previously in Dubai. Mix that in with your academy coaching in the UK. That's a perfect blend for me, and I think that really would help you stand out amongst the 200 plus academies. I think that's unbelievable.
100%. Yeah.
So look, let's get into philosophy then. I know you've got students in my school who've been in your care, and they speak really well of you. What's Liam like, the coach? What's Liam Hughes' coaching philosophy?
I think it'll go back to the name of the podcast, but in terms of having that personal relationship with the player, I think you get 10, 20 times more out of them. So for me, yes, there's the technical side of the game, the tactical side, but I I think the psychological side's key, especially when you're working with young players and not just the younger kids we said before, 4 and 5 years old, but young adults. You know, you're working with 15, 16, 17-year-olds who, you know, hormonal, if you will, and they don't know whether they're coming or going. So having that relationship where they can go, do you know what? I trust Coach Liam, and I trust he's got my best interest at heart. I think that is a key part of what I would bring to the table.
So what does that look like then? You talk about building relationships there,
exactly,
guiding and mentoring.
Yep.
You touched on the name of the podcast, Better Players, Better People. We have these conversations all the time about not aiming to produce footballers, but to produce better people. What does that look like? How does that take shape in a coaching session?
I think a big thing is we can concentrate so much on these session plans and delivering the session, but for me it's always been a little thing I learned, you know, many years ago. There was a mentor I had back when I was at the FA, and he'd always mention the importance of asking a question but listening. How many times the coaches, thousands go, you know, to the player, little Johnny, how was your day? Little Johnny's about to explain how it was, and it's like, right, next, and move on. Little Johnny needs to know that you care. So it's, for me, it's always asking a follow-up question. Okay, Johnny, how was your day? Listen to what he's got to say. What are your plans on a weekend? And I think the big thing for me is following up on that the following week. Right, Johnny, how was that birthday party on the weekend? And little Johnny's thinking to himself, hang on a second, Coach Liam actually, he listens to what I'm saying. And I think that's a key part of the whole process of being a, you know, interpersonal person and making sure that, yes, we can do all the coaching on the pitch and we'll help the players technically and tactically. But if you care about them, you're going to get the extra 20%.
Absolutely. I think that's it's in teaching's the same. It can be difficult when you've got large numbers of students in front of you. But building relationships, I think parents need to understand or be aware when they're watching their kid in a session. If that coach is taking time to have that conversation in the water break, they're not just sending the kids out to have a drink and they're not engaging with them. If they're, you know, creating conversation there, the kids will give more. They will, because they'll have that relationship built. So that's one aspect. Let's talk about the technical abilities now, because I know you're one of the experts in the city on this. Obviously, with your background, and you know, I recently seen you in Portugal doing a coach education course with some ex-professional players, Premier League players. You've got your A license. So, what are the key technical skills you would try to foster in? Let's give an example: 10-year-old boys.
I think for that age group that you're mentioning, I think it's having that relationship with the football. So if we're going to really delve deep on a 10-year-old player, I think I've watched over the last couple of years whilst being in the city and the country, there's not a massive amount at that age group, at that age, that have got a ball at the feet for a long period of time. There seems to be a big emphasis on hurdles, speed ladders, and that's brilliant. But if we're going to kind of dissect it and go down to the football side of things, at 10 years old, you've got to have a really good relationship with the ball. I'll go back to the method behind that is street football. When me and you were kids, you know, I got dragged in by my mum, by my ears when I was, you know, 9, 10 years old at 10 o'clock at night. I'm still kicking a ball against the wall with my friends. Constantly. We didn't have PlayStations, we didn't have Xboxes, and whatever the new ones are now. So we only had a ball. That was our best friend, if you will. Now, these kids have got access to absolutely everything. So the time that we have, and it's minimal time, let's have it right, 2 sessions a week if we're lucky. It needs to be spent with the football at the feet. So,
do you know what? There's always an example. I don't think I've actually said this before, but I work with our head of rugby in my school. I'm not going to drop his name in here because he'll want kudos to that, but he can juggle the ball as good as any footballer in the school. And that comes from just having a ball at his feet when he was a kid. And you're right, there's street football, but times have changed now. So I think what you're alluding to is in your sessions, you'll give time for that with the 10-year-olds and time with the ball.
100%, yeah.
What's the difference then if you had a 16-year-old, girls group of 16?
I think
technical skills, did they differ there? Is it still the same rule?
Depends on the level of the group, I would say, and the level that they're playing at. That's all got to be relevant. You know, if this is an under 16 girls or boys team that is playing almost recreational, if you will, then I'm still following the route of the 10, 11-year-old in the sense of lots of ball manipulation and ball mastery. If this is a group that's an advanced group, then we're going into that tactical corner now. You know, it might be little phases of play from a technical standpoint, but we're also looking, can we delve deeper with positioning? What does that look like? And more understanding of the game of football. Which
Do you think that there's an increase in terminology now for the kids who are playing football, parents as well who are watching in? Terminology gets banded around an awful lot. You know, you technical skills, tactical skills. How do you manage that side of it? How do you make sure you're not overcomplicating it?
shouldn't be reinventing the wheel, should we? Let's have it right. Football's a simple game. It's that age group at 11v11 as one football. But I think, the terminologies come from clubs wanting to be, especially over here, like a professional academy in the UK, for example. So the terminology that someone's using in, let's use Manchester City, Preston North End, for argument's sake, you know, they'll have their own terminology. I think the way forward over here is keep it simple. For me, less is more. I can give you all the terminology you like, but if you don't understand it, it's irrelevant. So I think being on the level of the player, I think what we've done really well recently, and I'm sure a number of clubs have tried it too, is kind of using, a lot of kids play FIFA, don't they still? Is using FIFA terminology, and it used to wind me up for the first couple of months.
I think it is, but pull back.
Even calling an older midfielder, like a CDM and a CAM, and it does irritate me, but it's on their level. So you've got to get down to their level at some stage. So I think that's important as well.
So do you play with a CDM, an attacking midfielder? Is that what you have in your teams then? Is that?
Give away my team now.
Okay, look, let's get on to a topic I'm interested in. We've spoke about this recently, the rise of one-to-one coaching. My personal opinion on this is still forming. I'll give an example. I remember driving past a really famous football grassroots area in Liverpool, where back in the day we would be there with our friends, no coach, playing World Cup, playing matches we'd set up with other kids from the next estate, and driving past this particular field and seeing a boy, must have been 8 or 9, his dad's on the sideline, arms folded, he's watching his boy run through slalom poles with a coach, tippy tap on a ball, back again, and it, as I say, my opinion is forming of this still. I know you've got your input on this, obviously, with Liam Hughes performance coaching. Why the rise of this now? Why are we seeing so much one-to-one coaching, almost like tutoring for players?
I think a couple of things come into play here. So I think in terms of the way the world's going, so I'll go back to that again, you know, players aren't training as much as maybe they used to be because of access to a number of other things that are going on. But also
training or playing? Both?
Well, worryingly probably both, But also alongside that, I don't know what your thoughts on it, but COVID. I think COVID happened, and for me, since COVID happened, I saw a rise. I'd not seen a massive amount prior to that, but I haven't been looking for it. So maybe that argument's the other way around. But I've had when you glance online, there's some interesting approaches. But for me, the big thing is, I've said this to you kind of off here before, but if I'm seeing a player 2 times a week, if I'm lucky, for 90 minutes per session, if I'm lucky, the worry for me as a coach is, what are they doing the rest of that time? Yes, the school sports going on. Yes, they're playing other sports, which is fantastic, and I would echo the importance of kids not just playing football, playing different sports. I think JT said that on the last podcast. But for me, having repetition on the football, what my session looks like, no doubt will look different to the next person and the person after, but it's tailored around that individual. So that's a big thing for me. What are you coming to me with? Are you coming to me with aspirations of becoming a pro player? That's your aspiration. Who am I to kill that goal first and foremost? I'll do everything in my power with my connections and with my experience to help you along that journey. But it was another thing that we mentioned before as well with Connor was, we'll try our best to help you. I'm not telling you I'm going to make you a professional player by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to try and support that journey. And where that ends up is, at the end of the day, it's up to you.
The first thing is, the question there was about why we're seeing an upsurgence. I completely agree, and I hadn't even made that connection with the one-to-one coaching. But I just want to talk about the pandemic and the aftermath. What I've seen from a sports coaching side of that. Certainly, I can speak from my school, which is a large school. There's a lot of kids who played sport. We were really lucky in my school that the leadership supported getting special permission to continue school sport. And I still to this day would probably suggest we were one of the few schools, certainly for a fact I know this in the city, potentially UAE, and then beyond that, we were one of the first schools to return to school sport. It was just training. We were heavily directed in terms of ratios and sanitisation before and after the session. It was new for the staff, which was a challenge for the team. But I'm proud looking back that as a school, we offered absolutely the best we could by getting school sport back as early as possible, way before other schools. One of the reasons for that is I remember spending the summer in Dubai. We couldn't leave. And noticing academies getting special permission to operate. Now, this might, I think you were out of the country then.
I wasn't here at that time.
So academies could get special permission to run their sessions and for that industry to sustain. And for me, it just made sense as a school to get that permission, and we did that. Yeah. But the effect I have seen is that the academies who were able to continue and offer competitive sport, not saying there's a fight between club and school, you're always going to have that issue with commitment, because students will have time commitment after school. They might want to train for the club, and you might need them on the field playing for your school. Yeah. There's sometimes that clash, but certainly the increase in students playing sport outside for clubs, I did see during that pandemic time, and we're slowly getting back to now. I'd say a percentage of kids in each year group playing school sport, but the number of kids playing football, if they're a footballer, they play for a club. That just tends to be. There's very few now. There used to be a lot more, but there's very few now who don't play in the club and academy situation. And I think that's where one-to-one has probably, taken off. So what would you say then if I was to argue, and I go back to the example I give, I'm driving through Liverpool and I see the boy on the sideline, the dad standing there, and you completely, I agree, you're not going to say that this kid's going to go on to be elite. There will be certain clubs and academies potentially who will allude to that if they get the one-to-one coaching. Because we talked about time, what is the benefit explicitly of the one-to-one coaching compared to going into a group and playing with their friends, developing the relationships, the teamwork skills, the communication skills? If that kid's given up once a week for one-to-one, why not just put them into a group situation?
100%. I think for me, the way I certainly see the one-to-one stuff is it's like a top-up. Years ago, you top up your phone, didn't you? It's a top-up. So what I'm certainly not saying is get rid of your team training, come to see me at Elite's Performance and we're the future and whatever. That's certainly not what we're saying at all. I think make sure you're training twice a week at a minimum, maybe 3 times. And if you've got that time and you've got that drive and that willingness and you want to do more, then there's an option. And I think that's a key detail. It's not forced in any stretch of the imagination. Maybe the people are out there doing it, but I'm not chasing anyone. People want it. There's a demand for it. Demand for quality coaching, I would say, and
it's probably about the balance, isn't it? Of course, it's getting that balance it's a team sport.
Don't take them out of. Yeah, I think that's a big thing for the parents. Don't be doing one-to-one sessions 4 days a week, 3 days a week. Don't be doing that. That's crazy. And I do a lot of one-to-ones, but I won't see those individuals, those players, those clients. No way, no chance more than twice. Yeah. Once is used most of the time.
Do you think? How do you police the situation where, or how do you monitor it? Do you monitor it with your players where they're doing too much? I've had players in my school who've had a club. They're committed to the club. They've had a school team. It might not be football. It might be a different sport. They've done one-to-one, and then they have speed training, or they've got an S&C session in there. Yeah. And I've noticed certainly burnout. I've noticed disinterest. Yeah. How do you police that? How do you monitor that?
It's a difficult thing to police, isn't it? I think that's where the support of the parents comes in. You've got to have that relationship with the parents, because you see that player however many hours a week that is. The parent sees them a lot more. So having that relationship with the parent to say, listen, Jay, how many, has Johnny been swimming at 5 a.m. this morning? Yeah. Has he been doing PE? Has he gone to a football session? And now you want to do a one-to-one session? Yeah. Well, that one-to-one coach or that individual coach is doing that is going to advise the right way, I would hope. Yeah. But for me, it's all dependent on. I'm not going to be able to police that, but I can have that conversation with the parent. the kid most of the time just wants to play.
They'll just play.
So
they'll play through injuries.
It's managing it, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, let's get on to coach education. Tell me about Portugal. How did that come about?
Yeah, I think what's really important in football in general is having, making good connections. Football's a small world. Me and you are sitting across the table. Yeah. So it's not just making those connections, but kind of maintaining them throughout the years. Football's a small world. I've employed people in this country that I taught on the FA Level 1 8 years ago, and now they're in Dubai, doing quite well. So that sort of stuff happens. Very similar to the Portugal trip. I was invited across with a number of kind of football leaders, technical directors in different countries, and we spent kind of a week going around some of the best academies, Benfica, Sporting Lisbon. We spent a little bit of time at Estoril, which is a smaller club, and just seeing how the youth academies work over there in comparison to obviously the UAE. Yeah,
and do you know what? There's a few coaches now who have come across in the UAE who have done a similar thing, and they don't just rely on their homeland to deliver their education. Yeah. I think that's really important. I think once you leave the UK, that can be such an eye-opener. You can work alongside coaches who are educated in Germany. I work alongside teachers who are educated in different countries. And I think having that blend, it opens your eyes to different strategies, and you just win. You become a better coach in that situation. What value would you place then on coaches in your club developing their own education and continuing to upskill?
It's paramount, because if your coaches aren't continuously being educated and understanding not just the game more, but the new trends that are happening within the game, how are we going to develop players even more? What I can't stand, and what I think, be careful how I say this, but in the sense of previous clubs that I've spent time at, there's always going to be a couple of coaches who are happy plodding along, like in school with kids plodding along. They're dangerous, very dangerous to the culture of a football club, because at the end of the day, the bread and butter is the players. They should be at the forefront of everything. Yes, there's a business aspect to things, and yes, there's the relationship building, 100%. But at the end of the day, you haven't got a football club if you've got players. So if you want players to develop, the coach has got to be educated.
Always learning.
It's as simple as that.
Okay, I want to ask a question I always ask the people who come on the podcast. How do you develop the person and not just the player?
It's a good question. I think I'll go back to right at the start. It's building that relationship with them. If you can build a relationship with them, build that trust, I think it's an open door policy both ways then. I think with your experience as a coach, whether we talk about me or anybody else, if you can draw on those experiences that you've had in certain moments of the game or certain seasons, whatever it be, and the player can understand that, I think they're only going to become better.
And what values then would you try and instill? Shaping young minds here. We talked about teenagers. What values would you try and instill in these people which would help them become the better person later in life?
I think the big one's always, people say this all the time, but I think respect in general. I'll give you an example in terms of knowing the value of a number of things, but money as well. I've worked with a couple of players, and one player that I worked with, and they'll know who he is, has kind of left the pitch. He'd wore his football boots 4 or 5 times, and he's claiming his football boots aren't working, so he goes to throw his 2,000 dirham football boots in the bin, and I'm like, whoa, hang on a second. Go and give them to somebody who's less fortunate, who doesn't have as much money maybe as you or your family do, because for me, that's seeing the value in something is so important. So if I circle back to it, respect's key, but don't just value what's happening around you, but value yourself a little bit more as well. That's massively important. It's respect and value. Hopefully that helps. Okay.
Brilliant. Liam, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure, and good luck to everything that you'll be going to do in Azul FC.
Cheers,
Thank you.